So regret is a major issue for survivors of narcissistic relationships. There is a lot of rumination and unpacking and re-unpacking everything that happens in these relationships. And one of the greatest regrets people have shared with me over and over and over again is, how did I not see these patterns sooner? How did I not get it? Because now that you have learned about narcissism and these patterns, it's pretty unmistakable. You can't unsee it. I often see people as having a before-after moment with this stuff. And when that day comes when you get it, and you can't unsee it, right? It's an odd sort of perceptual ability, because while other people around you are still swooning over the charms and charisma, you can't not see it. But once upon a time, you didn't see it. None of us did. All of us have that once upon a time. And now you do, which, by the way, is a quantum leap. It's not easy to do, and you're still in the minority of folks who can see this narcissism stuff clearly. I live in a silo where I think about this stuff all the time, and when I emerge, I recognize that actually most people don't get it. Now, I was recently in a group where a member of the group was behaving quite narcissistically. They were talking over people. They were expecting the spotlight to always be on them. They were taking attention from others. They weren't allowing other people to ask questions. They were just taking up way too much space, right? Everyone, myself included, and I'm a fawner from way back, didn't stop him. And as time went by and the group got to know each other more and more and felt safer with each other, there was sort of a shift. There would be audible sighs when this person would start to talk. And after several days, people were starting to make their protests known a little bit more loudly. I was actually happy to see it, because it was a living example of something I have always suspected, but don't always get to see in live action like that. What happens is that once we feel safe in the world or safe in a group of people, and we understand how narcissism works, that is when we not only feel safe enough to detect it when it's in our midst, we may feel safe enough to call it out, which is ultimately what happened. And so when I see folks struggle with regret about not calling it out or not seeing it, I remind them that the reason they didn't do that was it probably wasn't safe to see it. When we look at Dr. Fried's work on betrayal blindness, she makes a crucially important point, because people blame themselves for not detecting the betrayal or seeing it or acting in the face of it, right? For example, breaking up with someone who betrayed you. She makes the point that we have to ask ourselves what the cost would be of seeing it. What would it cost us psychologically to really acknowledge what's happening? For example, to really see and process and integrate what infidelity would mean, or financial abuse, or a person repeatedly lying to us, or a person breaking our trust in some way. What would it mean for us to really see it? Because in most cases, to really see it, it would feel like it's a call to action, to have to do something about it and see the world differently, perhaps confront the person or end the relationship. And those things have ramifications. And there could be clear and present dangers like violence or financial harms or being isolated and abandoned by a group of people or losing a certain status in society. It could be the fear of conflict. It could be the sense of not feeling ready for that potential level of change. It just could be the fear of leaving the status quo you're in. And all of this is complicated by practical stuff like families and money and careers and cultural and societal stuff too. So there is a cost to seeing someone betraying you. And that cost is usually some kind of a loss of safety or familiarity. There is another piece to this, which is isolation. I always use this silly example of, let's say a UFO lands in your backyard. If it happens and nobody sees it but you, that kind of sucks, because nobody's going to believe you. And I'm guessing that when you take out your iPhone and try to take a picture of the UFO or the aliens, it's not going to work, and your phone's not charged or you can't find it. You know how that goes, right? So either way, when nobody sees it except you and you talk about it, you yourself doubt yourself, and then you wonder if anyone will believe it, or if you can even describe what happened correctly. And in many cases, people just don't talk about it. When we see these patterns in isolation, these narcissistic behavioral patterns, or we see them when we're in the midst of a bunch of enablers, we may still doubt ourselves even once we get it. Even just one other person who rolls their eyes or gives you a wink or something to affirm and confirm that what you saw was real, like, oh my gosh, this person's talking again, that can make a huge difference. But because these things often don't happen, because we don't have the support, we doubt ourselves. In my clinical practice, many a session is spent with a client breaking down something that they experience, but they doubt their perception. And so the work becomes us uniting their instincts, their knowledge, and their body so they can start trusting those moments more. And even if they don't say anything, at least give themselves permission to acknowledge this isn't cool, to disengage, and not go down that gaslighted rabbit hole of what's wrong with me. When the narcissistic relationship initially happened to you, and it was childhood, there was literally an impossible cost to seeing it clearly. Nobody can see their parent as a betrayer or as an abuser or as a manipulator. And a small child's brain can't get around the idea of gaslighting, right? But on a side note, I actually do think if we could get clever about it, we could teach children about gaslighting. And I really and truly think that we should start teaching about it in the schools, but that's never going to happen. So when our witnessing of narcissistic or experiencing of narcissistic relationships happens in adulthood, especially if you've never experienced one of these relationships before, and you care about this person or value or love them, seeing it as narcissism can feel impossible until someone teaches you about it, and you have to be willing to learn about it. And then you learn it, but it still takes time. But then, in order for us to really give ourselves permission to see it, and perhaps even do anything about it, we have to feel safe. Most often, that safety can come from being with other people we know have our backs if we were to say or do something about it with other people who see it too. You may not get into a full-on scuffle with someone, but you may give yourself permission, for example, to step out of a space where there's a toxic person, or to talk with other people about it to process it, or not doubt yourself. Because most importantly, you'll be able to confirm within yourself that something wasn't quite right in that interaction because you were with a group of people or in a situation where you felt safe. The goal of healing is to feel that safety in more and more places in your life, to trust yourself even if you're alone, and to have a bag of tricks for how to cope with it, or to be aware of how your body and psyche respond to it. Some of you, for example, may detect that you mildly dissociate at times that when you're dealing with someone whose behavior is narcissistic. Others may catch yourself in a fawn response. Others of you may sense other physiological changes in your body. Receive that information. I got to tell you, my main go-to is the polite lady nod. I smile, squint my eyes, and do a lot of nodding. And I work on an exit plan right then and there. I usually excuse myself to go to the bathroom. And once I'm out of the situation, usually in the bathroom, I can breathe and ground and say, yep, that was that. And in my case, say, you have to keep doing this work, Ramani. There's just too much of this in the world. And then we keep on keeping on. I wish I had known how to detect this and get out of these situations sooner. Ultimately, we get it when we get it. But trust what feel like uncomfortable patterns, because it probably is happening as often as you think. And it's easy to talk yourself out of it. That whole summer camp, we got to get along with everyone. Because memory is funny. We disproportionately remember bad stuff compared to good. Because it protects us, right? You might think to yourself, gosh, this narcissism feels like it's more than 10% of people I'm encountering. Frankly, it probably isn't. Even in that big group of people I told you, where there was one person behaving badly, only 1 or 2 out of that big group behave badly. We remember the bad. But when we feel safe, we may feel empowered to do or say something. And when we start to feel safe, instead of feeling like it's everywhere, we start to realize, like, actually, no, it's not. It's there. And hopefully, when you have this experience of being in safe groups, safe settings, and feeling that there's permission to acknowledge it, you'll start giving yourself more and more and more permission to acknowledge it. It's a process. But when we are in safety, it's as though someone puts on a very clear pair of glasses on us, and we can see it and trust it. Thanks again.